But if you're going to make this argument that they're going to kill themselves if you don't, but also some trans people don't have dysphoria, well, then why the fuck should we let them transition? Right? They wouldn't say that about China. It literally comes down to, are you in opposition to the US? If so, then all of your actions are justified. Our first actual video that we'll watch is SFO. Wherever in the millions of videos that you guys posted it is. Hey, and we can watch Sort Otaku on YouTube without feeling like we're going to get banned.
Hey, this will be a less complicated video than usual. I just wanted to put pen to paper, well, keyboard to text file, on some ideas I've been thinking about recently. Yeah, I know I promised that the videos are going to come out first, but what can I say? I'm currently addicted to Project Zomboid. November 20th was the Transgender Day of Remembrance, where we're supposed to remember the tragic deaths of trans people. The White House press secretary gave us a hard number of this year's trans victims in the United States.
Today, on Transgender Day of Remembrance, we grieve the 26 transgender Americans who were killed this year. Year after year, we see that these victims are disproportionately Black women and women of color. No one should face violence, live in fear, or be discriminated against simply for being
24 is the level cap.
Yeah, 26. In a nation of 330 million people, where approximately 1% of them are trans, 26 of them were murder victims. That's a murder rate of 0.00007%. Considering that in 2022, there were approximately 21,000 homicide cases in the States, with that 330 million population, the napkin math comes out to the general murder rate of America being, I think, 0.006%? These are both incredibly tiny, so literally who cares, but trans people do seem to have a much smaller chance of being murdered. Rachel Richards, a conservative trans YouTuber, put out a video titled "Who's Killing Black Transgender Women?" In it, she points out that Black trans women comprise 66% of the 202 cases of fatal violence against trans people in the United States from 2013 to 2020. The article she quotes ties this surge of Black trans victimization.
I think that something that we need to do to talk to people about trans issues, right, is to not use the, oh, well, you know, like they're going to kill themselves stuff, right? Or there's violence against trans people, right? Because I don't think that's going to convince anyone who's not already convinced, right? Because at this point, if you're not convinced by like, oh, well, kids are going to kill themselves, which I'm not even sure if that is as accurate as it once was, right? Like, I don't know if the data still holds up to the amount of people who will try to attempt to kill themselves as a trans person. So like, that's something to keep in mind. I don't think that's a good argument anymore, because it's just like emotional blackmail almost, right? And I don't think it's a good argument. The best arguments are just like libertarian in nature. Like, are they harming you? Why, if it's not harming you, if it's not directly affecting you, if they're not trying to force you to be trans, et cetera, like, if they're not, you know, they can swing their fist all over the place, right? And you can't do anything about that unless it's going to make contact with you, right? Because it's Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. 1 second. Best Jax films. Here it is.
Boys can't like other boys. That's wrong. This is some anti-straight propaganda meant to turn our kids gay. No son of mine's gay. Adam and Eve.
Just something about that ending that always gets me, dude.
To the rise of white supremacy and the far right in America. But Rachel
DGG
digs up the
recovery
individual...
stream. Oh, shouldn't SFO look at the death of trans people proportional to population, not overall homicides within the general population? Well, he did. Like right before this, right?
07.
Some Merc shit, some inward arc review. Oh, okay. I really do not care about that Merc person. They're just like not interesting to me whatsoever.
7%. Considering that in 2022, of this year's trans victims in the United States.
Today, on Transgender Day of Remembrance, we grieve the 26 transgender Americans who were killed this year. Year after year, we see that these victims are disproportionately Black women and women of color. No one should face violence, live in fear, or be discriminated against simply for being themselves.
Yeah, 26. In a nation of 330 million people, where approximately 1% of them are trans, 26 of them were murder victims. That's a murder rate of 0.00007%. Considering that in 2022, there were approximately 21,000 homicide cases in the States, with that 330 million population, the napkin math comes out to the general murder rate of America being, I think, 0.006%? These are both incredibly tiny, so literally who cares, but trans people do seem to have a much smaller chance of
I think he's just dismissing it. He's dismissing it because the murder rate is really low, right? 0.007%. And then the general population's murder rate is 0.006. So yes, he is dismissing it because it's a small, how's it going, Food Shots? It's a small proportion of the amount of people there are
being murdered. Rachel Richards, a conservative trans YouTuber, put out a video titled "Who's Killing Black Transgender Women?" In it, she points out that Black trans women comprise 66% of the 202 cases of fatal violence against trans people in the United States from 2013 to 2020. The article she quotes ties this surge of Black trans victimization to the rise of white supremacy and the far right in America. But Rachel digs up the individual cases and discovers the vast majority of the murderers of these Black trans women are actually Black men. All that being said, the Williams Institute did state that trans people are 4 times more likely than cis people to experience violent victimization, not including murder, like rape, sexual assault, or aggravated assault. The numbers are 86.2 trans victimizations per 1,000 people versus 21.7 cis victimizations. So, is there an epidemic of trans murders in the States? No. But you can certainly make the claim that trans people are more likely to be the victims of other types of crime, especially sexual crime. The statistics for why this is the case aren't exactly clear. If I personally had to guess, it would likely be a combination of multiple factors. 1. Sexual assault and power. Oftentimes, sexual assaulters use positions of power to prey on their victims, whether that be teacher over student, boss over employee, police officer over criminal, or medical professional over patient. Trans people may simply be seen as easy targets due to their marginalization, or they may be fetishized as targets due to their unique...
Didn't Tucker Carlson get into hot water for a while back defending a woman teacher giving a 15-year-old boy a lap dance? That wouldn't surprise me, like, at all, but you have to understand that that does not... like, conservatives don't care if, like, a woman teacher a high school boy. They're like, haha, high five, bro. Even though, like, the mental effects can be very, very similar. If not, I don't know, like, at the same rates as, like, a young girl getting, statutory raped by a teacher. I don't know if it's, like, the same exact amount, but, yeah, like, the young boys who get taken advantage by their teachers also have, negative mental health outcomes, but they don't care about that because it's cool for guys to have sex and it's not cool for girls to have sex, and girls are victims and guys are just, getting some, You think Tucker is going to get rehired? What major news organization would hire him? MSNBC? CNN? No. Like, the only major one would be Fox, right? I mean, OAN or Newsmax might, but I think that he had some drama with them, so he's probably not going to go work there.
Sexual status. 2. The majority of sexual violence happens within romantic relationships. And as a general rule, the chance of violence in a relationship goes up the more outside the norm that relationship is. Interracial relationships tend to see a heightened level of violence. Lesbian relationships as well, both sexual and non-sexual violence. It wouldn't surprise me if it were the same with trans people. 3. A disproportionate number of trans women per capita work in sex work, either pornography or prostitution, both of which are jobs that are rife with sexual violence.
I'm putting off going into the gym. I'm just going to do
Day of
it.
Remembrance is actually less about trans murder victims, despite its official definition, and more about blanket trans deaths. Yes, it was founded in 1999 as a memorial to the deaths of specific black trans women who were murdered, but definitions shift over time, and looking at how the holiday is colloquially spoken about on social media bears this out. Trans suicide is also far more likely to be a source of trans death than trans violence is. 41% is a meme number for a reason. It comes from a 2012 report called the National Transgender Discrimination Survey, which claimed that 41% of the 6,450 trans people who were interviewed attempted to kill themselves at some point in their lives. Suicide seems to be the greatest risk that the trans population faces, more than violence, which is why most common discussions of the Trans Day of Remembrance quietly slip suicide in with violence. I'm laying all of this out to make a specific point. The moral underpinning of trans activism is primarily in suicide prevention. Here's the logic. Look at this post on the LGBT subreddit that is pretty popular, titled, "For anyone thinking transgender genocide isn't happening, or that it won't be that bad, should the Republicans gain more power?" The trans genocide rhetoric from progressives has been pretty popular. Every move against trans activism is labeled genocidal, and the people who make these claims do believe that a genocide is currently in progress. When pressed on this, they usually refer to the 10 stages of genocide. The 10 stages of genocide is a theory developed by progressive Gregory Stanton, working in genocide studies at George Mason University. He developed the framework after the Rwandan genocide, and it reads as follows. Stage 1, classification.
Oh,
People
we're
are
doing
divided into
trans
them and
genocide
us.
discourse?
Stage 2, symbolization. When combined with hatred, symbols may be forced upon
We've been over the 10 stages of genocide. Here. 10 stages of genocide. We've been over this a million times before, especially during the trans-genocide arc. But there are some of these that you could put any group of people into at different points of history, right? And you can put trans people into some of these, right? Like discrimination, dehumanization, classification, right? I would say you could put them into those three. Or no, and polarization, right? Conservatives do not like trans people. All right? But they haven't like separated them out into different categories and made them wear visual markers so that everyone can see who is trans and who is not. They haven't started organizing, death squads. They haven't prepared any sort of death camps, right? They haven't started shipping them off to those death camps, and they haven't exterminated all of the trans people. But, they've been discriminated against. There's polarization, there's dehumanization, right? Classification. But you know what? You know who else in the U.S. has had all of that happen to them? Black people, right? There was an us and them, whites and the blacks, right? There was discrimination, Jim Crow, right? Dehumanization, right? The scientific racism, the polarization, right? Where like they're just different than us. We need to, as white people, stick together so that if because if black people take over, then or if they get equal rights and they're going to try and destroy us all, right? All the same things happened to black people. But nobody says that black people underwent a genocide, right? There is one group in American history that has undergone all of the stages of genocide. Except for symbolization. They didn't need to do that. That would be Native Americans. They got genocided. Trans people not getting genocided. Trans people aren't getting genocided. These terms are themselves loaded and can be put into most forms of marginalization and that are widely different. No, actually, they don't have. Do they have an actual link to the 10 stages? It's really weird how people want to look at the one paragraph little blurbs in all of these instead of reading. Actually, I don't even know if this is the entire essay. Because, no, hold on. It might be. Now that I'm... Okay. Yeah, this might be the whole essay, but it might not be. But I've read the whole essay, and they're a lot more specific. Right? Removal or denial of a group's citizenship is a legal way to deny the group's civil and human rights. That's what is under classification by like removing their citizenship, right? It's not just like, oh, well, you're trans and I'm not, right? It is like, we're going to literally take away your rights as a citizen of the United States. Native Americans were not granted citizenship in the USA until 1924. After centuries of genocide that decimated their populations. But it's way more easy, way more convenient to read one paragraph blurbs, right? That they're probably putting into text to speech because they're too unintelligent to read, right? And this, listen, if they put this into text to speech, it might take 10 minutes to listen to, and that would just be too much. So, you know, we're just going to go with the little blurbs here. And you can fit almost any group in human history at some point into almost all of these stages. I think it would be interesting to see people pushing both the trans and Palestinian genocide in the same stream. Damn, I wish Antenna Cactus was here because it would be really it would be really great to see that. Do y'all remember the Twitter post? It was a picture outside of, I think, Toronto's like college or something, and it was a banner that said trans liberation cannot be achieved until Palestinian liberation is achieved, right? Like they're tying trans stuff to Palestinian stuff. So people do push both the trans and Palestinian genocide at the exact same time, right? Even though they are completely, I cannot think of a way to link those things in my mind. No amount of mental gymnastics can link these two things into the same chain. It's just insane. But okay, let's continue. Sorry, this is a triggering topic for me because people are just so... Aren't Palestinians anti-LGBT? Yeah, by and large. I don't think that these people would want to live in Gaza, but, you know. Anyways. All right, let's listen to him.
Willing members of pariah groups. Stage 3, discrimination. Laws or cultural power excludes groups from full civil rights. Segregation or apartheid laws, denial of voting rights. Stage 4, dehumanization. One group denies the humanity of the other group. Members of it are equated with animals, vermin, insects, or diseases. Stage 5, organization. Genocide is always organized. Special army units or militias are trained and armed. Stage 6, polarization. Extremists drive the groups apart. Leaders are arrested and murdered. Laws erode fundamental civil rights and liberties. Stage 7, preparation. Mass killing is planned. Victims are identified and separated because of their ethnic or religious identity. Stage 8, persecution, expropriation, forced displacement, ghettos, concentration camps. Stage 9, extermination. It's extermination to the killers because they do not believe their victims to be fully human. Stage 10, denial. The perpetrators deny they've committed any crimes. I can see how this framework can have some use in an academic setting. For example, in a study of actual genocides, which is what Professor Stanton did for his whole career.
Crazy monk.
But nowadays, his framework is misused colloquially for political points. I've seen multiple bread tubers, the biggest being Hassan and Vosh, why does it always have to be those two, who have pushed the idea that according to the official academic definition of genocide, supported by the United Nations, a stage 4 trans genocide is currently underway.
That's so
Remember,
stupid.
stage 4 is dehumanization, the stage where one group denies the humanity of the other group. While it's true that there are absolutely some insane anti-trans people out there denying the humanity of trans people, does that mean it's a genocide? This seems like a wild misuse of the framework in order to score cheap political points. Apply this standard to anything else and you'll see what I mean. Are Trump supporters being genocided? I mean, it's not hard to find progressives dehumanizing them, so I guess we're already on stage 4, guys. Hell, I'm sure from the Trump supporters' point of view, we're on a stage 6 genocide, where Trump-supporting groups are being driven apart, leaders are being arrested, including Trump himself, laws are being passed, and judges are handing down rulings restricting the freedoms of Trump supporters. It's obvious that Trump supporters aren't actually being genocided. It's also obvious that trans people aren't actually being genocided either. What's actually going on here is that the word genocide contains a lot of emotional weight, and dishonest people want to harness that weight for political ends. Are non-citizen residents of every liberal country currently experiencing a stage 3 genocide because they can't vote like citizens can? Is admitting that two different groups exist a stage 1 genocide because it's us and them? Do socialists want to genocide the bourgeois? Why is this framework suddenly absent in every progressive discussion regarding what Hamas wants to do to Jewish people? Oh, also when the—
Because Israel is aligned with the U.S., therefore Israel is bad. And that means that Hamas, if they attack Israel, they're in a way, you know, by proxy, attacking the U.S., which would be based. Do you guys notice? Have you guys seen all these losers on TikTok? All these like Zoomer TikTok lefty like idiots reading Osama bin Laden's manifesto letter to America, and then reading the Quran, and they're like, you know, this Muhammad guy, he kind of had a point. Maybe we should kill the infidels. You know, like I'm actually starting to, you know, I don't think that I believe in God, but this book is making me rethink that. It's like, please move to Saudi Arabia with your pink hair, with your 40 piercings all over your face, please. Is that Israel is a settler, colonial, genocidal state? But they wouldn't say that. They wouldn't say that about China, who is in Xinjiang, right? Which is not, ethnically Han Chinese, right? They wouldn't say that about China. It literally comes down to, are you in opposition to the U.S.? If so, then all of your actions are justified always.
Those bread tubers before claimed that the 10 stages were from the UN. That's actually false. The
True.
UN Genocide Convention only covers the destruction of a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. It doesn't cover political groups or what is colloquially known as cultural genocide. This is why, for example, when Germany was denazified, it wasn't genocide. By the way, I'm not saying I agree with the anti-trans laws coming into effect in the United States. A lot of them I don't actually agree with at all. But I'm pointing out something specific here. Let's return to that Reddit post. Genocide doesn't just happen through direct killing. This will cause deaths, and many of them. Just because they aren't lining people up in front of firing squads or gassing groups of people to death doesn't mean they would not be 100% responsible for lives lost. Suicide, fatal hate crimes, discrimination in work and housing, or increased mental health issues, causing loss of ability to function or support yourself, sudden and prolonged deaths from stress, grief, and terror. Remember what I said earlier? The moral underpinning of trans activism is primarily in suicide prevention.
True.
Even if you don't kill people yourself, if you make their lives so unbearable that they kill themselves, I think it's reasonable to say that you've got blood in your hands. While it's still their choice to kill themselves, and they shouldn't do it, you're not blameless either. Take this, combine it with the fact that trans people are at an elevated risk of suicide, the 41% meme, and you've now laid out the moral foundation for trans activism. The phrase literally killing trans people became a meme after trans activists used it like crazy online, culminating with J.K. Rowling making fun of it. But here's the logic behind it. Suffering from gender dysphoria causes, among many other things, suicidal thoughts. Therefore, alleviating gender dysphoria is preventing suicide. If transitioning alleviates dysphoria, then transitioning prevents suicide. If you prevent dysphoric people from transitioning, then you're creating the conditions for dysphoric people to suffer from suicidal thoughts, literally killing them by forcing on them the conditions that lead them to kill themselves. This effect is so serious, so deadly, that any action that non-trans people commit that might increase dysphoria for a trans person is literally killing them, because more dysphoria means more suicides.
But that argument kind of goes out the window when all of these people also want to say that you don't need to have dysphoria in order to be trans, doesn't it? Which is why I don't like there's no consistency with like the hardcore, like ultra leftist people on this, right? But like, if your argument is, oh, well, if you don't let people transition, then they're going to kill themselves. Why? Well, because their dysphoria is so bad that they just can't live with the thought of living as a man or living as a woman when their brain is telling them that they want to be the other way, right? Which, you know what, that is something that has happened, and it is something that will continue to happen, right? But if you're going to make this argument that they're going to kill themselves if you don't, but also some trans people don't have dysphoria, well, then why the fuck should we let them transition? The argument that people are going to kill themselves is not the best argument. Again, it's not the best argument, and it's very easy to like point out things like that, like, oh, well, if you don't even need dysphoria to be trans, then why are you even telling me about people killing themselves for dysphoric reasons, right? You don't even care if they have dysphoria. Why waste our time engaging with the online left? Because they have some negative real life effects. They don't add anything valuable to the conversation, but they do take a lot of stuff away from the conversation, which is why we have to add it back in. We have to add back in like good faith data analysis. We have to add back in good faith, concessions to people on the right who are like, well, I don't really care if someone wants to be some sort of trans person, I don't really care. But like, if they're going to bring that into schools, I think that that's really bad. And then giving a concession like, yeah, you know what? I mean, if someone's going to be saying some like crazy stuff while they're a teacher, like, if you feel like you're gay, right? Maybe you're attracted to men and sometimes you like to, like put on a dress, then you're automatically trans and you need to be put on hormones right away and then pressure that child into being, put onto hormones. Like, yeah, obviously that's bad. That's not something that we should be okay with, right? Because there's probably a lot of people out there who are even like, who are straight, right? That like to wear, women's clothing, a dude that likes to wear women's clothing. That could be possible, right? In fact, I'm pretty sure that is a thing. That there are just some straight men out there that like to wear dresses. But like, if you're going to try and convince a kid that they're trans, then yeah, that's bad, right? And there are examples of that out there. Does that mean that there are a lot of examples out there that are like that? Or that this is a major societal ill? No, but that's the conversation to have, right? I don't think that this is a major societal ill. I don't think that there are teachers out there that are trying to forcibly trans children, who are trying to convince children that they are like trans when they're not, right? Like if there is a teacher that's out there doing that, yeah, they should be fired. They should be like, depending on like what extent they go to, maybe they should be put in jail, right? Like that's a conversation to have, but the conversation shouldn't be, oh, they're trying to force our kids to be trans, or if you don't allow all trans people to transition immediately, then they're all going to kill themselves and it would be on your hands. That's what the point of engaging with the like extreme left is to like add the context in there and add the concessions in there that are necessary for there to be an actual conversation around these things so things can actually get better.
That's why we've seen such a huge push towards, for example,
okay, we're
the
gonna go
abolition
for it.
of sex-segregated spaces. Because a trans person who is refused into the sex-segregated space of their choice might have their dysphoria increased due to the exclusion. It's why we've seen a massive push for the adoption of progressive morality surrounding pronoun use. Declaring your pronouns ahead of time, using specific types of pronouns, punishing those people who don't comply, in order to reduce dysphoria and therefore reduce suicide. You even see extremely weird niche shit, like people removing mirrors from public spaces in order to reduce dysphoria, because trans people might see themselves at a bad angle and notice they don't pass or something. Or the removal of all gendered language, leading to things like people with uteruses, or birthing people, or bonus hole havers, or all that other nonsense. Or demanding that misgendering or dead naming be the equivalent of hurling
who has been punished for using the wrong pronouns in real life,
therefore reduce suicide surrounding segregated spaces. People commit that might increase dysphoria for a trans person is literally killing them, because more dysphoria means more suicides. That's why we've seen such a huge push towards, for example, the abolition of sex-segregated spaces. Because a trans person who is refused into the sex-segregated space of their choice might have their dysphoria increased due to the exclusion. It's why we've seen a massive push for the adoption of progressive morality surrounding pronoun use. Declaring your pronouns ahead of time, using specific types of pronouns, punishing those people who don't comply, in order to reduce dysphoria and therefore
I think that the punishment, I don't think he's talking, well, he might be talking legal punishment. I can't speak for SFO, but like, think about like the it's, all right? Wait, did you really see the term bonus hole at the place where you got, Soyaddle? Oh, you should have taken a picture of it. It then blew up and left Twitter with that, dude. You would have gotten so much subscriber off of that. No, I think that the social punishment is what he's referencing, or that's what I would be referencing if I was talking about this. Like, there is social repercussions if you don't immediately cave to like its pronouns. right? Like, what is that? Recently, there was that tweet from that trans girl about the murder of Brianna Gay or Gee or whatever the fuck her name is in England, where she got stabbed brutally like 40 times by two teenagers who just wanted to murder her for some reason. And more information came out about that, right? Where they were calling her it, right? And this trans person tweets out like, this is why I hate it when people try to use its pronouns or something along those lines. It wasn't really that bad of a tweet, but it was really, really, I don't think he's referring to neopronouns. Yes, he's referring to pronouns. They don't distinguish this anymore. Right? She got a lot of shit for that one. Yeah. Hey, my ass, can you link that tweet to me? Because I don't know who that is. I think I've interacted with them in a group chat before or something. I might have, because they seem to be friends with a lot of the people I'm friends with. It was bad timing though. IMO. Whether or not it's bad timing, that wasn't the pushback she got. The pushback she got was not respecting its pronouns. That's not what you don't that's what you don't understand. Do you understand what I'm getting at? No. Whatever you typed in. Oh, hold on. No, sorry. The pop-out player is blocking your comment. Sorry. But the online left doesn't care about facts. That's true. They care about a narrative. That's true. The narrative of Marxist utopia being held down by those evil liberals and conservatives is an empirical view to argue against. Not all arguments are going to be empirical. And you can use empirical evidence to say, no, look, even under liberal, capitalism, liberalized, globalized capitalism, people's quality of life has increased substantially, even compared to those places that were socialist. Yeah, so this is the trans girl that got murdered very brutally, very unbelievably brutally, right? In their exchanges, which were read to the jury, Y sometimes referred to Brianna as it, asking the girl, is it a femboy or a, well, say that word or I'll get crucified. In text messages, the teenagers discussed whether Brianna would scream like a boy or a girl as they plotted how to assassinate her, the court heard. Right? And she said, I truly don't do trigger warnings, but it's warranted here regarding Brianna Gay or Gee, whatever, her murder. Friendly reminder that its pronouns are not progressive. They're hate speech. I will never use them, period. RIP, no amount of justice can offset the evil thrust upon you and your family. I just want to point out 494, a lot of these were quote tweets. There were some likes. There were a lot of really negative quote tweets on this. And did she hide all of the other responses or something? Where the fuck are all the really? Oh wait, were they under the dehumanizing transsexuals by using it pronouns does not equal preferring to refer? How easy that was. Neopronouns using non-binary people. Neopronoun using non-binary people aren't responsible for creating the culture that led to this murder. That's a disgusting thing to say. Your energy is better spent criticizing those who use it's to dehumanize trans people over those who are trans that use it. They hurt no one, unlike the cis majority. And it there were some where I wish I still had this Twitter account so that I could look at the quote tweets and find the dumb bitch. Wait, no, hold on. My friend's Twitter account. Let me see. Easy Gamer GG. If you guys want to follow a Twitter account, he's my friend. He has all the same opinions as me. Oh no, did I not quote tweet it? Oh, damn it. I mean, my friend. Whatever. Damn, there was this one person who was insane. They were like, yeah, I do not want to be perceived as human. Ah, there it is. Hey, it's user here. Respect people's personal pronouns. In the attempt to be progressive, you're actually being quite transphobic. I don't represent its users. But for me, the dehumanizing factor is a plus. I don't want to be seen as a human or a person. And some individuals are objects, not people. I'm sorry, but no. No one is an object. We're all human beings. If you want to dehumanize yourself, fine. I won't participate in it. I like my real take is that I actually don't really care that much about neopronouns. All right? What I care about is the effects that neopronoun usage has on, actual trans people who are actually suffering from dysphoria, people who are, transitioning and are getting, really negative blowback for that. That's why I care about the neopronoun usage and the like hardcore lefty line, because there's been, since I've been invested in politics, right? There's always been this way of talking about gay people, talking about trans people, talking about, non-binary people that was like really f***ed up, right? The attack helicopter memes, oh, well, why don't I just identify as a moose? Because I'm not a moose, I'm a human being. And everybody rightfully shit on those opinions because they're stupid. Yeah, obviously you're not a moose, but nobody's unironically identifying as a moose. Then around like 2019, 2020, this shit started picking up. And then you have people like Demon Mama, unironically, making the argument on stream, on video, recorded for everyone to see into perpetuity, defending the idea of helicopter gender, attack helicopter gender, saying that, yes, it is as valid as man or woman. And if someone wants to identify as attack helicopter, then they surely can. Even going so far as to defend the concept of Nazi gender, saying that I would genuinely question your motives for identifying as Nazi gender, but in order for her to stay logically consistent, she bit the bullet on Nazi gender on one of her streams. It's just insane. No one is an object except hot women, am I right? Up top, brother. Let's go. Watching Not So Erudite struggle and fail to explain the performative theory of gender is physically painful. No, you aren't a woman if you perform the role of a woman. Woman literally means the performance on this view. Wait. No, you aren't a woman if you perform the role of a woman. Woman literally means the performance in this view. That's how people can be trans before transitioning. I'm sorry, but Sunday's actually literally right here. I agree with this. The person who performs, or wait, woman is a performance. So the theory, this is my understanding of the theory, the performative theory of gender, right? It essentially is like, what we see as gender is a set of roles and performances that we put on for other people so that we are treated in a certain way, so that we are, treated in a way that we expect. Other people know how we expect to be treated, et cetera, right? By intentionally talking in the way that I do, right? Sometimes more aggressively. I have a deeper voice than most cis women. I don't try to intentionally heighten my voice so that people think that, my voice is a little higher, right? I just talk with my normal speaking voice. It's a little bit lower. There's a lot of things that I do that perform masculinity. Therefore, I am performing the role of a man, right? Or I am doing the performance of manhood, right? So if I were to transition, right, the performativity that I would be doing, I would be performing womanhood, right? I would be talking with my voice a little bit higher. I might be dressing a little bit different as if it's a costume, right? I might grow my hair. Oh, I was about to say grow my hair up, but obviously I got a lot of that. I might start wearing makeup. I might I used to paint my nails too. Not all of these things are going to be like necessary, but they're all sufficient. No, none of these things are independently sufficient, but all of them in like coordination are sufficient to be performing womanhood. I'm not going to be able to I've never read a book on performativity theory. or performance theory, whatever it's called. But I've heard it spoken about enough by philosophers that I've listened to lectures by. I've listened to enough, video essays where people are arguing back and forth about it. So I know the general theory of it. I wish that my mods weren't so ready to drop your mom jokes. I wish I could ban you without having to go through the trouble of remodding you. You. I really want to do this boss battle, but like this is I've done this before on stream. Like this is the way that I kind of explain gender to people that don't already agree with or don't understand like the trans conception of gender, right? We have like 3 basic bubbles, right? This is like my layman's introduction to this is like the layman's introduction that I have for gender, right? So like inside we have all of like, or let's start with the outward bubble, right? And then we can build back out. The outside bubble is going to be everything that you do outside of your body, right? So this is going to be all the things that people perceive about you, right? And the way that society is going to interact with you, right? So if the first 2 bubbles are giving off, woman, right? Society expects you to be probably a little bit more submissive. They're going to expect you to be dressing more femininely. They're going, all of the things that you would look at someone, right? And it when you see it, legal argument, right? When you see it, that's a woman. I expect to talk to a woman this way. This is what they expect from me, right? These are like the societal expectations aspect of gender, right? The social construction, right? Right here are all the things that are going to be, I'm sorry, that looks like it's pointing towards the middle circle. Damn it, I just suck. Let's start from here. The blue circle is going to be all the things that will be informing the red circle. So these are the things that you're going to do on the outside of your body, outside of your mind, right? So you want people in the red circle, right? You want the red circle to reflect femininity onto you, right? People are going to interact with you based off of this blue circle. So what do you have to do in this blue circle to have people, have the red circle give off womanhood? Well, you're going to dress in, feminine clothing, right? You're going to talk higher. All those things I was saying about like performativity, right? This is like the performativity aspect of gender, right? I'm going to perform womanhood so that, society, the red circle, treats me as woman, right? And then the inside is what we would say is like your internal thoughts, right? Like, do you feel like you are a man or do you feel like you are a woman? Do you feel like there is some sort of incongruity, right? When you talk and you hear your voice is really low, does that make you uncomfortable? Does that like you up because you don't expect it to be like that, right? When you look at yourself in the mirror, do you like hate it because you feel like your mind's eye of yourself, your conception, your self-conception, is that more of womanhood, right? That is the internal circle of gender, right? So then instead of building outward to in, let's build inward to out. This is, let's say, a biological male who feels in their self-perception as a woman. This is the internal aspect. There's nothing that the outer circles can do to look into this, right? Because it's all in your mind. You can't ever read anyone's mind to see if they're truly trans or something like that. This is just someone's inward feelings. But how do they express those inward feelings, right? A biological man that feels like a man probably wears a lot of jeans and t-shirts, probably, some cargo shorts or some shit, have deeper voices, has a beard, They want people to see themselves as a man because on the inside, they have a self-conception of themselves as a man. So what do they do for the blue circle? A biological man that feels like a man would grow a beard, maybe. Maybe they don't try to heighten their voice. They just talk with their normal lower voice. They give off masculinity, right? A biological man that feels like a woman on the internal conception right here is going to want to express that inner feminine feeling. Wait, I can erase like that? Oh, cool. Didn't know that. They're going to, into the blue circle. Yeah, they might naturally grow facial hair, right? They might naturally have a lower voice, but they want to express their inner feelings on the outside. So they might heighten their voice a little bit so that their voice is a little bit higher. They might grow their hair out a little bit so that, people associate longer hair with femininity, so they grow out their hair. Maybe they make sure that their beard doesn't grow in. Maybe they get like electrolysis or whatever the you say that, or they shave it very closely every single day. Maybe they, do like some pretty extreme body modifications, whether it's surgery or through working out, and the way that they dress. They are trying to perform the role of woman. And because they are performing the role of woman, they want the red circle, which is society, to interact with them in the way that they are putting out into society, When can I be unbanned on Kick? Bye. You can come back tomorrow so that I can time you out again because it's fun. Bye, Panda. So that's like the baby's first, baby's first explanation of the complex theory of gender, where you're not satisfied with just treating people as a human being in the way that they want to be treated. If that isn't enough for you just to like be chill with other human beings around you, then here's a more in-depth explanation. But really, you don't need all of this to convince people that, you should treat trans people as human beings. You should just be like, chill. Just like chill the out. They're not doing anything to you. If they're doing something to you, you can be mad. But until they're like actually directly affecting you, I think that it's really stupid for you to be upset about trans people in general. I've been enjoying the articles that pronoun movements like Latinx are Western cultural imperialism on minority groups. Yeah, unironically it is. I live in Houston, Texas, where like half of the population is Latino. And I've never heard someone who is Hispanic fucking say Latinx. Never once in my life, okay? It is a meme. Nobody says that shit.
Reduce suicide. You even see extremely weird niche shit, like people removing mirrors from public spaces in order to reduce dysphoria, because trans people might see themselves at a bad angle and notice they don't pass or something. Or the removal of all gendered language, leading to things like people with uteruses, or birthing people, or bonus hole havers, or all that other nonsense. Or demanding that misgendering or dead naming be the equivalent of hurling racial slurs. The urgency underpinning all of this is preventing suicide, preventing death. And if you're a decent person, you should want to prevent suicide, of course. However, if you're a reasonable person, you also recognize that there's a limit to this principle. Here's an example. Let's say I were sexually violated as a child with a cucumber. I wasn't, by the way, but let's assume that it was so traumatic that every time I saw a cucumber, it caused me extreme feelings of distress to the point that I became suicidal every time. Should I be mocked for my issue? Of course not. But should I be able to demand that the entirety of society bend to meet my needs, that all cucumbers be removed from public sale, so that I don't ever have to experience one whenever I go outside? Of course not. We can have sympathy for those with special needs, and we can accommodate them in some ways, but...
Hold on, really quick. Is anybody like a super big autistic Pokemon nerd in chat that can tell me whether Mudsport is worth it? That's all I want to know. I'm going to wait for a second to see if anybody knows.
Society bend to meet my needs, that all cucumbers be removed from public sale, so that I don't ever have to experience one whenever I go outside? Of course not. We can have sympathy for those with special needs, and we can accommodate them in some ways, but there must be a limit to that accommodation. And this is the core of what I want you to consider today. Special needs is the correct way to discuss trans activism. No, I don't mean that as an insult, though it's kind of funny. The way trans activism positions itself, the way it behaves, is like disability activism. Due to an unfortunate circumstance, there is an identifiable group of people who suffer from a unique medical condition that makes their ability to engage with society harder. We therefore have a moral obligation to secure their rights as individuals wherever possible. For example, when we build a wheelchair ramp going into a store, we recognize that people in wheelchairs can't access that space. There's no reason they shouldn't be able to shop in the store, so we have a moral obligation to equalize access. But we also recognize the limits on this principle. A wheelchair-bound man will never play in the NBA. There can be other sports leagues for wheelchair-bound people to enjoy, but we don't demand the NBA accommodate him. The trans activist demand for access functions in a similar way. When a trans activist says, for example, that trans women should be able to play in women's sports, we can recognize the need for an equality of access that doesn't increase dysphoria and therefore doesn't drive up suicide rates. But we also recognize that the practical advantage that male puberty grants to an athlete is extreme, and unless a trans woman began their transition when puberty began, like at 12 years old or whatever, the integrity of professional level sports is destroyed by allowing trans women to compete.
I should have given him.
Here's the issue though. Because all the moral urgency that drives trans activism is based in suicide prevention, all of its demands must be fundamentally medical in nature, making it like disability activism. However, unlike disability activism, when you begin that negotiation process of what is reasonable versus unreasonable accommodation, like how it's reasonable to build a ramp to access a store versus it's unreasonable to put a wheelchair-bound man in the NBA, when that negotiation process happens for trans activists stop acting like their activism is like disability activism. They stop talking about their medical needs. Instead, their activism morphs into something very different. Gay rights activism is a type of progressive activism fundamentally different from disability activism. It's not a medical activist movement. It's a lifestyle activist movement.
And one of the things that I think that trans is a little bit of both. I don't know if he agrees with this, but I think it's a little bit of both for trans people because they do have dysphoria, and there should be some accommodations like access to, gender affirming care or whatever that should be, heavily considered, right? But in terms of like the lifestyle, they shouldn't be, discriminated against in the workplace or in housing or anything like that, or in schooling or in anything like that. Where it seems like there are a lot of people who are pushing for that sort of thing. Like there are some people who are trying to make the case that no trans person should ever be a teacher at a public school, right? Which is ridiculous, right? However, I will say that if someone's trying to push, something onto kids that they don't want, that is obviously different. But my bar for that would be much higher than it seems than these people, I think.
Where disability activists claim that they are different from the norm and need special treatment to be equal, lifestyle activists claim that they're the same as the norm, and treating them differently is therefore unjust. This is the logic behind gay marriage.
I might switch up
Gays
Vegeta
are just like
for a
straights.
clean
Why
switch
can't they enjoy marriage rights just like the straights do?
No,
and
we'll do
enough,
genocide joke because I don't like them as much.
Even if gay people do tend to get married less now that they've got those rights, should we prevent those gay people who actually do want to get married from doing so? Of course not. The moral underpinning of gay rights activism isn't suicide prevention, the same way it is for trans activism. That's not to say that gay people don't kill themselves at higher rates than straight people, they certainly do. But it's not the focus of gay rights activism. The focus has always been alternative lifestyles are valid and should not be suppressed by the law. To refer back to Haidt's moral foundations, it's a question of liberty and oppression, not care and harm. Lifestyle activist movements don't need to do the same negotiation with larger society that medical activist movements do.
Sorry, I missed what he said while I was talking.
Back to Haidt's moral foundations, it's a question of liberty and oppression, not care and harm. Lifestyle activist movements don't need to do the same negotiation with larger society that medical activist movements do. There is actually a serious cost to implementing disability rights. Somebody's got to build that ramp. And that cost doesn't exist with gay rights. Securing gay rights is 99% leaving people alone and 1% allowing gay couples to file paperwork that straight couples can already file. When trans activists talk about how serious their work is, when they talk about suffering from dysphoria and the suicide rates, they're making a medical claim. Their activism is like disability activism, where we have a moral obligation to change things to prevent their suffering. But when it comes time to negotiate those changes, understanding that there are other non-trans people whose points of view also need to be considered, the language of the trans activist suddenly shifts. Now it's not about dysphoria and suicides anymore. Now it's like gay activism. Now it's a lifestyle. Who are you to decide what trans people can and can't do? Who are you to judge my life? Who are you to say who is and isn't trans? Anyone can be trans. You don't need dysphoria to be trans. It's all just self-ID. You just are trans like gay people are just gay. You're oppressing us by questioning us. This is the Mott and Bailey of trans activism. Trans activists bring in all of the moral weight of the plight of trans people, the suffering, the suicides, and demand large accommodations equivalent to that plight. But when the costs of that accommodation need to be discussed, they switch track to the language of gay activism, which has a much smaller associated cost. Here's two very clear examples of what I mean. When you talk about banning trans women from women's sports, or from women's bathrooms or locker rooms, trans activism is framed as if it is medical. It's like disability activism.
Should I
Being
level
trans
up
is an
Vegeta,
unfortunate,
or should I
incurable
keep
medical
him as a
condition that needs to be
sacrificial lamb?
accommodated in order to prevent their suicide. But when you talk about, I don't know, a hypothetical medical procedure that cures gender dysphoria without transitioning, trans activism is suddenly like gay activism. It's a lifestyle, you bigot. You're trying to cure something that isn't medical at all, but is just an alternative way of living that causes nobody any harm. Trans activists switch between these two positions depending on which interpretation serves them in the moment, but they are mutually exclusive. Either being trans is an alternative way of living that causes no harm and people should be left alone to do it, or it's so incredibly serious that the entirety of society must be changed to accommodate them to prevent further harm. But it can't be both of these things. This is partially why I think the LGB splitting from the T thing is slowly gaining ground. People are recognizing that what is necessary to include people with alternative sexual interests is very different than what is necessary to include people with gender dysphoria, as well as people who don't have dysphoria at all, but claim to be trans anyway. As more and more people have slowly
All right, and this is probably going to be one of my hottest takes when it comes to trans issues. I'm probably a little bit of... I think that you got to have like a desire to transition, right? There has to be like an actual underlying, like psychological thing. I'm a little bit transmedicalist, all right? Maybe not a little bit by whatever people's definition is nowadays. Maybe I'm very transmedicalist, but like if you don't have like dysphoria, I'm not sure like why we should consider you trans and not something like completely different, all right? I think they even like non-binary people, if you don't have like, I feel like non-binary people are, have like a very low grade gender dysphoria where they don't need to like do like a full on transition, but they're like fine with being in like the, not ambiguous. What is it? Where you're, oh shit. What is it when you're like, look both like a man and a woman? Not ambidextrous. Does anybody know the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the word. But you guys know what I mean. Androgynous. Thank you. Holy shit. Yeah, the things that Gas is into. Yeah, like they're fine with being androgynous. I feel like that's probably alleviating what little gender dysphoria they have. Which is why I don't like immediately out of hand just say that people who are non-binary are not valid or whatever but yeah, I think that you have to have some sort of underlying, gender dysphoria type feeling. Whether we decide to like give different types of these feelings different names, that's up for scientists, and I'll go where that goes. But
recognize this Mott and Bailey, LGBT acceptance has trended downward for the first time in a long time, mainly due to the T acting as a boat anchor for the rest of it. Trans activists have responded by claiming that people who oppose or question their activism are simply transphobic, bigoted, racist, Trump-voting pieces of shit, that the pushback they receive justifies their radicalism, and they have continued to further dig the hole they find themselves in. When people stopped reacting to being called transphobic, they switched to transgenocider. Even that's become a tired cry now. So I have no idea what they're going to slander people with next. I also have no idea what they're going to say if a real transgenocide actually comes along. Considering they've abused these terms so much, all the moral weight has been stripped from them. What I do know is, many trans people who I've spoken to do not...
My dysphoria was more related to not having a proper birth sex, which is why I'm not referring to myself as a woman, but just as an androgynous person. See, when it comes to intersex people, I don't know enough about it, like either the science or anything like that. What psychologists say about intersex people, I just don't know. I'm probably a bad person trying to lump them in with like like the general. No, I don't think I would lump in intersex with transness, but people who transition. I don't know. I'd have to think about that, but like, just as an androgynous person. So would you consider yourself to be like non-binary? I'm not. Like, just a genuine question, not dunking on you.
Not approve of this shit. They don't want to play in women's sports at the professional level. They don't want to walk into a change room and wiggle their cocks at little girls present. They want to take their hormones and have normal careers and
True.
spend time with their friends and enter into consensual relationships with other adults and be left alone to enjoy their private lives as their natural inclinations demand, which is a completely reasonable request. They understand they're not the norm, and they want to actually be a part of that social negotiation that allows them to lead a good life in society. It might be the reactionary right wing pushing anti-trans laws right now, and to the extent that those laws are bad, we should oppose them. But it's the trans activists who are actively dumping gasoline on that fire.
True. Why are you referring to Rachel Richards, a man, as she? Because she is a she to me. I love SFO. I love him. I think he's a good dude. I think he's like a. I think that SFO is probably one of the people that like I probably have a ton of disagreements with, but also I do think that he's like a actually good, genuine person in the space. Even though he's not really part of like the Twitch politics, YouTube politics sphere, he's more like a gaming bro that also does politics. I think that he's like a really genuine good person.